We've been talking a lot about the California Fair Pay to Play Act. There's no way for me to transition, but I'm going to transition somehow, some way here. And this is interesting because one thing that we told you yesterday is that there are initiatives at several different states. Well, there's also an initiative at the federal level, and that would be the StudentAthlete Equity Act, which is something that's been introduced by U.S. Congressman from North Carolina, Mark Walker. We are now joined on the Shell Penzo Performance Line by Representative Mark Walker, U.S. Congressman. Congressman, thanks for your time this morning as we try and break this down. My question is, why is this issue even important to you?
Well, it's something that I've been working on for 2.5 years. I moved to North Carolina 27 years ago, and that was the couple years that the Michigan Fab Five and Grant Hill and Bobby Hurley. I even remember that back then that the Fab Five literally changed the face of college basketball with the black socks, the long shorts. It really changed the marketing and branding. There were two guys, Jimmy King and Ray Jackson, that never profited from any of that, but the other three did go on and really make a strong and healthy career from it. So I was a pastor for 16 years. I worked in the inner cities, Cleveland, New York, Baltimore. But about 2.5 years ago, I began to look a little bit more deeply into this and really realized there's some major injustices here as far as what's going on for these young adults who literally have to sign a document that strips them from any access to their image and likeness while they are a student athlete. And that's what motivated me to get it started.
Talking to Mark Walker with us again, U.S. Congressman in North Carolina. So now your bill, and we saw, this went through in California. Governor Newsom signed this into law the other day for them. That'll go into effect in 2023. Your bill, while that is at the state level, yours is at the federal level. Explain to people as in layman's terms as you can the difference in what you're trying to enact in North Carolina.
No, I get it. I think one of the problems. Let me talk in a little bit more of sports terms. I think that I consider myself a fan as well. You have to have a universal language because, for example, Alabama has a 5-star running back from California named Najee Harris. All right. So if California has an opportunity for student athletes, men and women both, to be able to have access to their image, and Alabama doesn't, now you put an unfair recruiting advantage for schools in California or Colorado. I think South Carolina is also looking at this. And in the specificity of the bill, it's important because I think the NCAA does a little misdirection in here, because if you look at the last sentence of their statement over the California bill, it says this. It says, the NCAA, we don't believe that the student athletes should be employees of the university. Well, nobody's asking this. This is a simple 4.5, 5-page bill. I know that surprises people coming from Washington, D.C. This simply changes the amateur status, which means that young adult does not get a single penny from the NCAA. He's not getting a single penny from the university. The only thing that he has is the same access that every other American and every other scholarship student has, whether it's music, business, education, which is having access to your image or likeness. And this is an important data, and I'll toss this out here. 99% of these student athletes never receive a single penny from a professional sports contract. So in a prime earning opportunity, if it's a couple $100 at a restaurant, if they're a backup quarterback in a small town or a dealership, they should be able to have access to do that. Maybe the university says you can't wear our apparel doing so. I get that. That makes sense to me. I'm a limited government guy. I'm not going to tell the NCAA, a nonprofit, how they need to do it. But I believe this injustice has gone on too long for these young adults not to have any access to their image.
Talking to U.S. Congressman Mark Walker from North Carolina, introducing the StudentAthlete Equity Act to Congress. So we understand what you're trying to do and the other states are trying to do. We understand the NCAA doesn't want to do this. Well, in the spring, you got to meet with some of the NCAA's top brass. How did that go?
You've been doing your homework. Well, I'm just going to be transparent with you. That I think the first question they asked me, what are you trying to accomplish here? And which surprised me. And yes, 4 of the top attorneys, or 3 of the top attorneys and a lobbyist came to see me, and they've got a very strong influence in D.C. I can tell you that firsthand experience. I don't think their intentions are to harm. I just think they're very slow to move. And, they've been promising me for 2.5 years that they were going to resolve this. I've reached out to Jay Billis, and I can share on your program this morning. He's actually coming to Washington, D.C., October the 16th, and we're going to try to blow this out the roof to be able to bring the attention that it needs to get this injustice right. NCAA, I'd love for them to be able to resolve this, but this has gone on for too long. You have 40% of these student athletes come from inner city or impoverished areas, and I think this is an opportunity to be able to have access. Nike or whatever major, they're not going to sign 100,000 kids to big-time, long $1 million contracts. The 1% is going to get theirs. This is about those student athletes busting their tail for 40, 50 hours a week on a practice field or on a volleyball court and being able to have at least a little bit of access, whether it's the summertime or whenever it might be, and I just think that's fair.
We're talking to Representative Mark Walker, U.S. Congressman out of North Carolina, Golic and Wingo. You just mentioned that the NCAA has promised that they would come up with a solution. If they do come up with a solution, what happens to this bill?
Well, I mean, we can certainly pull it because we've not even got it out of committee yet. And not getting too much in the weeds as you requested earlier, but it would have to go through the Committee of Jurisdiction, which is Ways and Means, that deals with tax law, goes to rules to the House floor for a majority vote, to the Senate, then on to the president's desk, which is probably going to be a year progress, if even that. And then the California bill, as remember, doesn't start to 2023. So there's some time to get it right. And this isn't about carrying a flagship for something or a justice warrior. This is simply about writing what I feel like something has been going on for decades, especially with the explosion of the last 2 or 3 decades where the money contracts. And I think the NCAA, and I would continue to offer them a word of wisdom, if I could, that quit trying to sell this as pay to play. This is not pay to play, but they know that's when the pendulum swings and you get the popularity vote. This is not pay to play, and I want to reiterate this. We're not asking the NCAA or the university itself to come off a single dollar of their profits. Hey, I'm a capitalist. Go and do your thing. But for these young athletes who would love to be able to take their family out to eat, whose face is on the program of that college football, college basketball game, or allow their family to see, I think it removes the middleman. The NCAA tried to convince me this would create more corruption, or like corruption doesn't already exist with some of these middle guys. I think it removes that, allows the young person to be an entrepreneur, and in some cases could even prolong them staying in school if they were able to meet some of their financial obligations.
Talking to Representative Mark Walker, U.S. Congressman from North Carolina. We've talked a lot about the California bill that was really the one that kickstarted the party for a lot of this, but we know there's bills in your state of North Carolina, South Carolina. We've heard of things in Florida and New York as well. And I'm interested, how much contact have you had with someone like State Senator Nancy Skinner or representatives from any of these other states as you guys all go forward with different versions of legislation all aimed at the same goal?
Well, some of them have reached out to our office, and we've talked to some. I haven't talked to the 2 that you've mentioned as far as what we were trying to do on the federal level. As you know, when you pass something federal, it supersedes, across the country. And as I reiterate, or let me reiterate, that's why it's so important. You can't have different recruiting or payment laws, if you will, from state to state. When you have a universal rules of recruiting, it would just create chaos. And I think for some people who haven't followed the sports or don't understand the sports, I'm not throwing any kind of dissent to anyone, but that's why in this particular area, it's very important that you have a uniformity when it comes to everybody playing off the same page here.
Mark, where do you think this ends? With your bill going through, or the NCAA coming up with something?
Well, I think we're going to get it done. I think the NCAA I think this is calling their bluff. I don't know if I agree with every aspect of the Gavin Newsom California bill, but I applaud it because for 2.5 years we've been working to try to get some buzz or attention around this. And NCAA is just a very powerful institution. And like I said earlier, it's not to throw too much dismay toward them, but it's past time that they resolve this issue, specifically because they've been promising they would deal with it year after year after year. And I just think the time has come, and I think because of some of these state legislators, I applaud them because what has happened, this thing is exploding in the last 2 or 3 days. And when we get back to D.C. next week, I believe that's going to be really ready to be able to get enough sponsors to get it through committee onto the House floor.
Congressman, we appreciate your time. Representative Mark Walker, U.S. Congressman from North Carolina. Thanks so much for joining us and for the clarity and information this morning.
Love your show. Keep up the good work, guys. Thank you.
I think that is an important for anyone that just tuned in difference from any of the conversation we've had before, because as Congressman Walker just referenced, he is proposing a federal initiative. This is not local. So he is proposing a federal, and the StudentAthlete Equity Act, I should say. Sorry, it solely says essentially that any kid can sell his name, image, likeness, like we've said before for California. The consequence for not allowing that would be giving up your tax exempt status for the NCAA. So it's a federal rule that comes in above and beyond everything else. That's simply about name, image, likeness, not about pay for play.
And he made very clear the goal is uniformity. The goal is, and this is something that, as he said, every bill is not the same. He's parts of what happened in California he doesn't exactly agree with, but we heard from Nancy Skinner, who was the one who introduced that bill in California. The goal is to prod the NCAA to do something at the national level. The goal here, and we heard him say, if the NCAA does do something, we can pull the bill.
Right.
So I think that's the ultimate reminder here is the NCAA and the value it has in this is it's already an existing infrastructure. You've already got people that are responsible for monitoring all of these compliance officers, people with these institutions that are already there, that are already used to dealing with these teams. Hell, we had rules and regulations meeting out the you-know-what every year when you started talking about what's legal and what's not under the terms of your scholarship. All it means is you add a few different pages of information they've got to give you at the beginning of each semester and a few more responsibilities on the plate of those people, in my mind, as a way to easily push this out into what the NCAA's already got out there.
So, it would seem, I'm just trying to think logically in my head. I think at least I'm, do you guys both think the NCAA is going to end up getting something in place? And if for some reason they weren't, it does sound better to have something federally done than state by state by state, right?
Absolutely.
And I would even argue that the attention, as Congressman Walker referenced at the end, the attention that California has given to this entire initiative is going to make this a larger conversation. Remember, this bill was actually introduced by him several months ago, but it's now at the center of attention because of the attention coming from California. The more states that get on board, the more attention to the federal
And the smartest thing they did was when he mentioned they got Jay Billis involved.
My God, that's right.
Yes.
Smartest guy we have.
Yeah, we all need more Jay Billis in our life.